Hi, thanks for joining us for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South. I'm Chris Cooper. There's so much to learn when gardening. Why did my plant do this? Or what made my plant do that? Today, we're going to answer some of those questions. We have lots of questions from you. That's just ahead on the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South.
Production funding for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South is provided by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to the Family Plot. I'm Chris Cooper. Joining me today is Joellen Diamond. Joellen is the Director of Landscape at the University of Memphis, and Celeste Scott is with us today. Celeste is a horticulture specialist with UT Extension. Thank you for joining me, ladies.
Yeah.
Yes.
Y'all ready?
Good to be here.
This is going to be fun. Y'all buckled in?
Yes.
I know, yes.
All right, you ready?
We've got lots of questions.
All right, let's see if we can get to them. All right, this is going to be real good, y'all. All right, so here's our first viewer email. Can you compost walnut leaves? I've heard it is not a good idea. And this is Robin and Dolores from Wenatchee, Washington. So how about that, Joella? What do you think about the old walnut leaves?
Well, you know, I understand their concerns. They're concerned about the juglone that is in the walnut plant that inhibits growth of other plants. But yes, you can compost it because the composting process also breaks down the juglone, and as time goes on, it leaves the system. But you've got to give it time, more time than normal compost.
Okay.
And maybe make sure that it's in a mix with other items that you're
Yes.
also composting, right? It's like
Right.
other types of leaves, other types of that dry material. Maybe not just like all walnut leaves.
Right, I would agree with that. So you got to
That's
mix it up,
true.
right?
That would be the best, because even fall, the juglone gets less and less in the plant. So the plant tends to want to retain it and not put it in its leaves then when it sheds the leaves. But it does, it's a mechanism to keep the walnut tree safe from all the understory plants that might grow underneath it. So that's the attempt that walnut tree is trying to take with the juglone.
They want to survive.
They
They're
wanna survive.
fighters.
Yep,
They're
they wanna
fighters.
Yeah, I think that term is allelopathic.
Yeah.
Yeah, it has allelopathic behavior.
Yeah.
Right.
And then there's some people that say the compost is good if you put some tomato seeds in it and they start to grow
Yeah.
with the composted, but you know,
Kind of
not
use
everybody.
that as a trial test
Yes.
to know that if that product is ready to be used and if it's going to harbor any of those mechanisms. That's a good idea.
Yeah.
I think it is a good idea. So how long are we talking though? How long y'all think it would take?
Well,
the composting
they're
to get it
talking
broken down?
about 2 to 3 months longer than normal compost.
Okay. Okay. All right. So yeah, it's gonna take a little while. Just
Take
have to
a
be
little
patient, with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Browns, greens, add some of that in the mix. Yeah, you're gonna have to add some moisture, add some water, not too much water, right? And that will help the breaking down of
Break
that
it down.
process. And you
That's
could probably
true.
add some alfalfa pellets and things like that. To add
Yep.
a little nitrogen to it to help it break down. So there you go, Robin and Dolores. Thank you so much for that question. So yes,
question.
you can compost those walnut leaves. Appreciate that. All right, here's our next via email. All right, Celeste. Can I grow sweet potatoes in Albuquerque, New Mexico? And this is zone 7A, 7B, and this is Demetria from Albuquerque, New Mexico. So what do you think about that one, Celeste?
Well, initially when I was reading through these questions, I thought, well, hey, they are in the same growing zone that
Yes.
I grow in.
Hey,
So
there you go.
sure, you can grow sweet
There you go.
potatoes. But then we have to take in a lot of other things to account as well. So let's think about their soil composition. Let's think about, their humidity and availability of the water. That's a drier and more arid in climate than we have here. So I think that yes, it could be done, but they're going to have to pay some special attention to making sure that adequate water is provided to that plant. The above ground portion, right, the vine that's growing as the sweet potatoes are developing underground are expansive. And so that's a plant that's going to require a lot of water. To make sure that it
And
doesn't
space.
wilt
Yeah.
and has plenty of space to grow. That's right. And then the other thing that I was thinking about the soils, I don't know what type of soil they have. Maybe is it very sandy? Does it drain very quickly? And so if that is the case, then they may need to consider adding some organic matter. so that that soil holds on to that moisture longer, makes it more available to that plant, or even just growing in raised beds where they can
that's an idea.
control that media when that's 100% up to them and able to make that what it needs to be. So those would be my concerns, but yeah, I think it's doable.
I definitely think it's doable. Yeah, so I would contact your local extension office there with New Mexico State University,
Yeah.
and they probably have some cultivars that you could probably
Yeah.
grow there. And I'm thinking 787B. I mean, the ones we have here is like Centennial. Yeah, that's what Bunch, Puerto Rico. I think that may
Yeah.
grow well there. Jewel is another one that comes to mind. So yeah, I would contact them and see what they think about that.
Yeah, because they'll have the varieties that do well in that area. And of course, mostly there'll be slips. You don't usually plant, but usually slips of, they might know a local source for the
might.
slips too, so they wouldn't have to send them off by a catalog or anything.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Demetria. We appreciate that. Yeah, good luck with those sweet potatoes, all right? Here's our next viewer email. How do you control spider mites on kale? And this is UT from Toronto, Canada. So, Celeste, how do you control those spider mites?
Well,
On kale specifically.
on
right?
kale specifically. So we have actually a number of options available
good,
to us.
good.
So first step, and I guess it depends on what scale you're growing kale, right? Do you have a whole field of kale, or are you got a couple kale growing there on your
Yeah.
porch or in your backyard? First, I would use a kind of a strong stream of water. Let's try to knock off what we can with that stream of water initially, and then working our way kind of up the ladder of chemical product options. I would look first probably towards products like neem oil, probably some horticultural oils, and then if we're not having success with those, then looking at some of our broader spectrum products. But spider mites in general are tough to control, and it's because they replicate quickly and they are very small, and when we are using some of these softer products, we're only going to see positive results if we get really, really good coverage, because the way that those products are working, spider mites are soft-bodied insects, and so when we're using those products, we're essentially like suffocating them, right? So you've got to get good coverage on the upper side of the leaf and the underside of the leaf.
That's right.
And that can be tricky when
Yeah.
we have leafy green type vegetable crops, right? So you're having to not only walk and be treating from the top, but you've got to turn that spray nozzle upwards and kind of hit them from the underside as well. Also, making sure that you're repeating those applications on a regular basis, 10 to 14 days. Make sure you're always following your labels for the specific products. But those natural products have no residuals, and they break down quickly in the environment due to sunlight, et cetera. And so they're going to require more frequent application. So those would be where I would start with spider mites for kale, and those apply to essentially all other crops as well. I mean, the same approach, the same application methods.
That's good methods. I mean, those are real good. Yeah, something else, practice good sanitation. Right, so you definitely want to do that. And it's funny, I'm sitting here thinking spider mites, kale. Usually when I think about spider mites, I think about hot, dusty, weather conditions.
And kale's a cool season
And kale's
crop.
a cool season crop.
And so,
so could it be stress? So if the kale is stressed, then of course here comes spider mites. Right. So that's what I was sitting here thinking in my head. So yeah, UT, you follow that, and I think you'll be fine. Yeah, read and follow the label directions. I think you'll be okay. All right. So thank you so much for that question. Here's our next viewer email. When is the best time, and how do you prune blackberries? And this is Larry from Bloomington, Illinois. So Celeste,
Yes.
what you know about pruning those blackberries? Huh?
Oh, this is so complicated. I wish I had a
it's
diagram.
complicated. Larry, it's complicated.
I wish I had a diagram. But okay, so we'll cover the cliff notes first.
Okay, let's do that.
Okay, so
All right.
blackberries have two different types of cane. They have one set of canes that flowers, that's called the floricane.
Okay.
That's what is producing the crop on that current year's growth. And then they've got a primocane. And those are the brand new canes that grew that year but aren't fruiting. Okay?
Okay.
So we have to have a couple different little approaches here. So as far as pruning goes, we want to prune out any of the canes that flowered and fruited in this current season, right?
Right.
At the end of the growing season. So whatever that looks like for you, wherever you're located, right? For us, that's the end of the summer. They've flowered in the spring, they've fruited in the summer. We prune out those floricanes at the end of that growing season in late summer, all the way to the ground. Cut them, and take them out. Then we need to come in late winter and top the primocanes that were left, right? So anything that was left, if we top them, if we pinch the tops out, that encourages lateral growth this way, okay? And our next growing season, that is the portion of that plant that's going to create berries for us. So if we can increase how many side branches they have, that increases the number of fruit blooms and yield that we're going to get.
Okay.
So
I'm following.
that is the most simplified explanation that I can provide for when and how to prune blackberries that have that biennial life cycle, primocanes and floricanes.
Primocanes and floricanes.
Yeah, mine usually died. I didn't have to prune it because it died. You don't know which one to cut out. Yeah, and mine kept traveling. The primary canes just kept traveling into my blueberries, and I'm like, you can't go over here. There's not enough room for both of you to live here.
They love to spread underground, so keep an eye on where those root suckers are popping up. They may be popping up places where you don't want them to be.
Right.
Yeah, those things get out of control. Yeah, so they're weak, get them out. Stunted, get them out.
Yep.
Disease, get them out.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Cliff Note version.
That's
Did you get that, Larry?
That's good.
Yeah, it's good. Thank you for that question. We appreciate that. All right, here's our next via email. When should I cut the blooms off my lime hydrangea? And this is Kelly from Alexandria, Virginia. So what do you think about that one, Joellen? Cutting off the blooms, huh?
Well, you can cut them off anytime you want, but I like to leave it in the winter for nice winter interest.
I do too.
And then when the leaves start breaking out in the spring, that's when I cut mine off, because I want them to be out of the way for the nice new leaves and new blooms.
Okay, so let me add this. So some flowers seem to stay attached into the next spring. The whole plant still blooms.
Of course, it's going
course.
to. Yeah, and if you weren't there to cut them off, they would stay there, and the plant would just grow around them and bloom over the top of them. But they'd just be staying there dead until they fell off.
So that's one reason I love paniculata hydrangeas because they bloom on new wood. We don't have to be all finicky about the timing of pruning as we have to be on some other types of hydrangeas, like your macrophyllus, like your oak leaves. They are always going to bloom on new growth, and so you less touchy about when to prune, But if you need to do significant pruning, right? So like some paniculatas can be 10, 12, 15 feet tall and really, just be really vigorous growers. If we need to prune to control size and are going to be taking off a lot of plant material, I like to come at that in late winter.
Got it.
That's really the preferred pruning time for the majority of all woody type plants. And so I'm going to leave those in that category and say come in March for this area. That, late winter can mean different things depending on where you are throughout the world. But here in Tennessee, that looks like March, April for us. And so do that, any kind of structural pruning that you need to do to get that plant shored up before it starts shooting out. I like to do it before it even starts shooting out its new growth.
Yeah, that's good.
For renewal pruning, yes.
Yes.
Definitely.
That is good. Yeah.
You're just getting the limbs off. Sometimes the winter can kill. I've noticed some of mine get winter kill, and that's why I let the buds just start to break.
So you
before
can
I cut
tell
it. So I can tell
if there's
where
anything else you need to cut out.
Yeah. Okay. I see that. Well, y'all are good. Kelly, I hope you got that information. That was real good. That was good. So thank you much for that question. All right, here's our next viewer email. Should I shorten my tall stick of Acusa dogwood so it forms lower limbs? And this is Rebecca from South Knoxville, Tennessee. So what do you think about that one, Joellen?
Oh yeah, I would do it. Yes.
You would do it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because if you just, and I wouldn't take a whole lot, I just tip off the top, that's the apical dominance up there, and it'll stop forming the hormones and stuff that actually keep the other branches from forming. You want to take that apical dominance away and let everybody have a free reign of coming in and filling out a tree. And hopefully it's in enough sun and it's not in too much shade, because Coosa dogwoods can take a lot more sun than regular other types of dogwoods.
All right, so let me add this. Sapling was planted this year. It's 12 feet tall with leaves all the way up. So how much would you take off? Yeah, all the way up.
I'm talking 6 inches or less.
Okay.
You just want to stop the apical dominance, and you just have to take the tip off. Not clear down, but I mean just take it off, because all the leaves along the stem will make branches and fill out.
All right, Celeste, I heard you say wow. So 12 feet tall with leaves all the way
Yeah,
up. So you're concerned?
that's tall.
That's tall.
So,
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
now,
tall.
if it were me in my own landscape, I agree with the things that Joellen said. Yes, removing that tip is going to help with lateral branching, but I feel like that is a flimsy, wispy whip of a plant, and so I might like bring it on down to 6 feet and allow it to really develop in girth, give it an opportunity for that trunk to grow in diameter and develop some lateral branches, just so that it's not so tall and flimsy, whippy. But that would just be like my personal preference, right? For my personal landscape. Either way is a perfectly good recommendation for approach to correcting the issue. And also I'll add that I don't want people to worry and think that means that they are like topping a tree, because I feel like everybody always hears, oh, don't ever cut the top out of your trees. They are going to, the next shoots that come out are going to be able to reestablish a central leader for that plant. So the one that's nearest to the top is naturally going to try to grow and straighten itself to replace what has been cut off. So it's not like the tree's never going to get any taller than that. Right, that's not what's going to happen. That tree will continue to develop in height.
Right,
and it's because we're approaching it while they're young. It's a sapling. It's a year or two old. So
it's small. You can take it. In fact, that's what they do in the nurseries.
Yeah.
They'll go through the nurseries. All the trees that are grown are all tipped, so that they form lateral branches. It's just a common practice.
that one just got missed.
Yeah, that's pretty tall, right? 12 feet tall. All right, Rebecca, thank you so much for that question. Yeah, if you have any other questions, your local extension office there in Knox County, check out my man Lee Rumble. He'll help you out with that.
Yes.
All right, here's our next viewer email. I have a shell alkali type dirt that does not like to grow anything. How can we improve it? And this is Stephanie from Olathe, Colorado. So what do you think about that one, Joelle? Yeah, shell alkali type dirt.
Obviously, it's not conducive to growing things, is why she wants to know if she can do something with it. And yes, she can. She can add organic matter of any kind. And, you know, you might want to get a soil pH test to see where you're at. So there might be other products that you could add if the pH is off somehow. But organic matter to the soil, loosen it up, and she should be able to grow something in that.
And depending on, you know, what level of commitment and like machinery she has to be able to make that happen, because that's could be a lot of product when it comes down to the math of it. All right, how much organic matter, how are you going to get that incorporated into the soil? They maybe wanted to just consider growing in raised beds again, and then you have complete control over that growing media. And you don't have to worry as much about what's going on in that native soil zone, as long as we make those beds deep enough to grow and support whatever particular crops that they're wanting to grow. So, you know, always an option is just to go with above ground growing.
I like that.
A lot of people will do that.
Yeah, a lot of people will.
And it is so hard, another thing I'll add, it's so hard to fight pH. So if she has a high alkali soil, if you're above 7, and we need to
Yeah.
bring that down, you're always gonna have to fight that pH. Our soils naturally want to migrate back towards whatever their original pH was.
Yes.
Makes sense, right?
Right.
And so instead of us trying to change the soil to be able to grow things that we want, I'd say let's grow the things we want in soil that we have complete control over. Not always soil, we'll call it a media.
Yeah. Yeah.
Media that we have complete control over. And then look at growing things in those native soils. Let's take cues from nature. Like look out and see what things are growing naturally in those climates, in those environments around her. And those are the things, right, that we need to lean more towards to grow in those native soils in a landscape type setting, so that we're not always having to come back to that discrepancy of, not enough organic matter to have a pH.
Yeah, that's the whole pH thing is tricky.
Yeah.
That nutrient availability thing. I mean, yeah, it's the old barrel, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
It
Yeah,
is.
It's like, too much, not enough. And you're right, once it gets above 7, fighting with elemental sulfur, you try to bring that down,
It's a lot.
it's tricky.
And of course, you got rain and it leaches out.
Yeah,
and
so you have
gotta
to think
start
about environmental
redoing
conditions.
it again. But
Right.
but if if she looks, maybe she doesn't like the plants that are around there, and that's why you would go to a raised bed, because when you have your own soil mix and you know what you want to grow, if you just put it in a container of any kind, it's going to do well. You might have to do a little more watering,
Yes.
but
We'll
you
do
can
all
grow
right.
stuff.
All right. So thank you for that question, Stephanie. All right. Hope you like those answers. Those were good. All right, here's our next viewer email. How do you care for amaryllis bulbs in Florida to get them to bloom each year? So this is Jan Marie in Palm Beach, Florida. So you know about amaryllis bulbs,
I
don't you?
love my amaryllis. And mine do well here in the ground simply because we have a cold spell and a dormant
So,
spell.
yeah, dormant period.
And in Florida, they may not ever get their dormant spell.
They just keep trying to grow.
Yes.
On and on.
So you you
Get
want
tropical
it
weather.
to get a stem of flowers, you need 4 leaves to grow. So if you have 8 leaves that grow in the summertime, you'll get 2 stalks of flowers.
Oh, I never knew that.
But the problem is, amaryllis has to have a downtime. So he may have to take them, or somebody maybe, Jan Marie, you may have to take them out of the ground, let the foliage die, and then put it in a cool, dormant place for 8 to 12 weeks for it to get that dormant period, and then you can put them back outside again and they should bloom for you.
Right.
But if you don't have the dormant period, they will not bloom.
And so that's the same concept that people follow when they're trying to force amaryllis
Yeah.
to bloom indoors in the wintertime, because that is not the natural time that an amaryllis would want to bloom, right? If they're planted outdoors and in a climate where they can survive the winters, the cold, then they're going to want to naturally bloom in early summer. That's when they want to bloom. So if you are trying to perpetuate them year after year for use indoors, follow those same
you can
instructions,
follow that.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So that's the thing
just
about
have
good
to-
tropical weather, right?
Yes.
Yeah, they can grow outdoors
all
all
the
year
time.
long. How
But
about
yeah,
that?
unfortunately, I mean, probably has beautiful foliage plants.
Right.
But if she wants blooms, she's going to have to give them a dormant period, 8 to 12 weeks.
8 to 12 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So what do you do with the bulb though? So we're here in Tennessee. Can
Mm-hmm.
we bring the bulb inside? Does it have to be refrigerated? I mean,
Well, they grow out here naturally. I put mine in the ground, and they bloom in late May, early June, but they get a cold period for at least 3 months out of the year. But yeah, she's going to have to dig them up.
Yeah.
And then in amaryllis bulbs, my aunt in Indiana used to say, "How do you get such beautiful blooms on yours?" And I said, "Well, it's starved. I put it in a pot almost the same size as the bulb."
yeah.
So it doesn't have a whole lot of area to grow in.
Oh, okay.
They like to be tight.
They don't like a lot, because sometimes you can buy amaryllis bulbs that have just been dipped in wax, and they'll bloom.
How about that? Okay.
So yeah, this is the same. They don't need a whole lot. You want them to be on the edge of, you know, oh my gosh, there's no more room for me to grow. I must bloom
So-
and you know, so I can continue to be a plant.
Survival, right?
It's a survival thing. Yeah. So yeah, she's going to have to dig them up, and she could divide them now, and she could give them to everybody if she wants to, but put them in pots, the bulbs in themselves, in individual pots, in a smaller, you know, just barely big enough for the container.
Okay.
And let them be in a cool, dry place, and let them die, the foliage die down, and cut it all off, and then in about, what, 8 to 12 weeks, bring it back out and see if they'll bloom again.
You could also store them without soil. Like they don't have to be in a pot with
They don't
soil.
have to be?
Yeah,
Okay.
so just dry. I have some like little flat cardboard boxes, and I kind of put some sphagnum moss on there and just kind of space my bulbs out. You don't want them to be wet or come into contact with one another where they could develop rotted
Right, I
spaces.
got you.
They need airflow, and so I like to kind of just nestle them on top of, like I've even used like that torn up raffia type kind of stuff. You know what I mean? Just like whatever I had, you know, laying around that I knew wasn't going to hold moisture and was
Right.
going to allow airflow.
Yeah.
So just make sure that they are nice and dry and dark and
The foliage has got to die down.
that's right. And the only way for that to happen is for you to quit watering them.
Quit water. Yeah, you got to
Yeah.
stop watering.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
Yeah, I used to. We
That's
used to
good.
bring. My aunt would bring them inside, and that's how hers would die because they don't live
Right.
outside
Right.
in Indiana. So she would bring hers in.
Haha. Jan Marie, did you like that? That was good. I learned something.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that is pretty good. And yeah, you can go to the University for Extension. I'm sure they
Yes.
probably have publications about, you know, amaryllis bulbs and all
They
that kind of
should
good
probably
stuff,
do.
right? I bet you
Yeah.
they do. All right, so Celeste, Jarla, that was fun as always.
Yes.
Learned so
Good.
much too at the same time, right? Yeah, so thank y'all so much for those questions. Thank y'all for being here.
Thanks for having us.
All right.
Yep.
Remember, we love to hear from you. Send us an email or letter. The email address is questions@familyplotgarden.com. And the mailing address is Family Plot, 7151 Cherry Farms Road, Cordova, Tennessee, 38016. Or you can go online to familyplotgarden.com. That's all we have time for today. Thanks for watching. If you have any gardening questions, head on over to familyplotgarden.com. We have answers to over 1,000 gardening questions. And if you don't see the answer to your question, you can send it in to us right from the website. Be sure to join us next week for the Family Plot Gardening in the Mid-South. Be safe.